pandemic was an existential crisis that not only put into sharp focus the fragility of life, but saw the merger of our personal and professional lives. Hello, my name is Chester Elton, and I'm here with my dear friend and co-author, Adrian Gostick.
Well, thank you, Jess. Yeah, our guest today says we need to humanize work. She says the best leaders are transforming their workplaces from motivating productivity with fear to creating effectiveness through inspiration, caring, empathy, and the word we don't say a lot in business, love. So how do we do that? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. As always, we hope the time you spend with us will help reduce the stigma of anxiety at work and in your personal life.
And I just want to go on record as saying, Adrian, I love you, man. I love you.
Well, I'm quite fond of you as well.
Hey, and with us today is our new friend, Chris Shipley. Chris is the author of the book, The Empathy Advantage, Leading the Empowered Workforce. As a journalist, she has documented, influenced, and predicted the impact of technology on business and society for more than 30 years. As an analyst, she identified innovative startups and gave them a stage to launch their market-making products. As a catalyst, she has advised hundreds of early-stage companies on positioning, business modeling, and innovation practices. Today, Chris focuses her work on the human and organizational challenges in the face of technology and economically driven disruption. Chris, welcome to the podcast. We're delighted to have you with us today.
Oh, I'm delighted to be with you and to have this conversation with you. It's an important one, and I appreciate that you are providing real leadership and bringing this conversation to the fore.
Well, we love that you're talking about empathy and really putting the bullseye on that with the empathy advantage. And so you talk in this new book about the new workforce. You know that's how you start the book, and some seismic shifts we've gone through with the pandemic, et cetera. So leaders listening right now, what do they need to know to rethink the way that they're leading this post-pandemic workforce we're in?
Well, I think the short code is what got you to where you were prior to the pandemic is not going to get you to the future. I think all of us came up with a set of leadership principles that were about driving productivity and getting the most from your people in a way that was all about and all centered on performance. And not to suggest that performance is not important, productivity is not important, but I think that research increasingly shows that the more human your workplace, the greater the engagement, the better the productivity, the performance. And so we've come through this existential crisis, as you said, that has caused everyone to really rethink the role of work in their lives and how that brings them satisfaction, how it brings them sort of obviously the money to live their lives, but have come to the point where living a more balanced work and life experience, more full and human work-life experience is something that is valued over the paycheck. And in that instance, leaders can't simply dangle more perks and money in front of someone and expect to get a good day's work. Instead, they really have to think about the whole person who's coming into the workplace and helping them be the best they can be.
And that's not an easy shift at all, is it? I mean, we've gone from this drive, work life, personal life. Now they've all merged together. And are you finding that is the toughest shift for leaders, is to make that transition, that all of a sudden I've got to care about the whole person rather than just the work person?
I think it is. I mean, we were, again, kind of taught that leadership meant you needed to have all the answers and you needed to tell people what to do and you needed to stand over them and ensure that the work got done. And now we're saying, listen, you don't have all the answers. In fact, it's impossible for you to have all the answers. And so you're going to need to bring those answers out and have them discovered by your team as a whole. And in that space, it's a leader needing to be vulnerable enough to say, I don't know. But let's find out together. Let's work this out together. And I think that kind of more mentoring, more coaching, more enabling style of leadership actually brings teams together, creates greater engagement, creates a team that's invested in the discovery and the outcome, and that ultimately leads to greater opportunity for the organization.
That's really interesting. We've seen in our work that anxiety in the workforce is sky high, right? And much of that is centered around job security, especially for younger workers, right? So, as an expert on tech trends, you probably know better than anyone that AI seems like the potential technology that's going to disrupt and cause a lot of job insecurity. Talk us through how AI is impacting anxiety levels and how empathetic leaders should react to that.
Well, let's peel that back a little bit and unpack the idea of anxiety. Anxiety largely is driven, I mean, there are obviously many causes, but in the workplace, in the workplace that you describe, out of uncertainty. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what this new technology is. I don't know how it's going to impact my work. I don't know if robots are going to overtake the world. Therefore, I need to be worried about them. And that creates anxiety. So I think that one of the starting places for organizations is just provide a education, provide a learning environment where we can learn together about the power of AI as a technology that enhances our work. And I think the other piece is reminding people that for generations, new technologies have replaced, in some, I'd like to think, assisted people in some capacity of their work. Physically, engines and motors made heavy lifting a lot easier. I sure much appreciate a spreadsheet over an abacus. These kinds of technologies, if you will, have transformed work by creating an assisted lift. And I think AI is one of those things. We tend to, I think AI is more frightening, creates more anxiety in the fact that it's been the thing of science fiction, and that AI is going to somehow consume us and become more human than humans. And when we recognize that AI is of humans and can assist humans, I think we can tamp down the anxiety level and discover that there's some really great things that can happen. I've recently been using various of the new generative AI tools to, days when I have a little bit of writer's block. What would you say? And I get an interesting answer that, sort of opens up the block, and I'm able to write more effectively. That's a real assist, and I don't fear that chatbots are going to take my job and start writing the next Advantage book. But I do think that they can help me think a little more clearly sometimes in the great overflow of information that we live in.
Yeah, it's a good push. This is about education. This is about, and as you mentioned before, going into the dark together. Look, we don't have all the answers, but we're going to figure it out together, which is, coming back to your main point of empathy here, is how we lead through uncertainty. So, what we found is that cultures are resilient to changes are the ones where leaders are willing to connect with the needs of the people in their care. And so I'm curious, how have you seen, as you started writing the book, any examples you have, or how have you seen empathy help leaders create these cultures that are more resilient when they're going through change? And by the way, every organization is going through change. So give us some examples of how this works.
Yeah, well, I think any organization where you see really strong employee engagement is one that, whether they realize it or not, is managing and leading through empathy, because they're understanding that again, it's a human being that comes into the office or flips on their Zoom screen in the morning, and that human being is a complex person full of all kinds of issues and challenges that go way beyond the workplace. But freed from that stress and worry and anxiety, they can be highly productive workers. So I think that organizations where we see a set of values that really look at the employee, their human workers, as true assets, that they invest in them. They invest in learning. They invest in discovery. They invest in creating an environment where a person can be vulnerable enough to say, I'm afraid, I'm worried, I'm excited, I'm got this idea, and that be treated as a contribution to the team and not a challenge to the authority of leadership. all of those kinds of, I'd look for all of those kinds of aspects in a company that's been very effective in leveraging empathy. But I do want to say, because I've had this question, I'm going to preempt a question I think you might ask. And people say, well, isn't empathy just, being overly nice? And isn't empathy mean you somehow have to solve all the problems of your people? I don't think that we're saying that.
Chester was going to ask that. I wouldn't have. But yeah, Chester would have probably asked that.
And I've heard some of this, from in other conversations where it's like, well, now as a leader, not only do I have to manage for the sake of the business, but I have to make sure everybody's happy and everybody's got everything taken care of for them. That is not what empathy is about. Empathy is about understanding where someone comes from, and then working together to find out even if there can be accommodation. Right? But it's saying, listen, I know that your kids are sick. How do we work around that today? Or listen, I know that the company announced layoffs and nobody has any idea what that means. Let's talk about what we can be certain about today. And as the environment changes, as we get more information, we're going to be totally transparent and create a greater assessment. And I will always, as a leader, be open and honest with you about what I know as I know it. That goes a long way to reducing anxiety without actually saying, listen, I promise you're never going to lose your job, or let me hire a babysitter for you, or all the kinds of problem solving that sometimes people get wrapped up in. If I'm the leader, I've got to make your life perfect. That's not what empathy is about, and that's not what we're advocating for. It's just recognizing that complex people come to work to do complex things, and that can get really messy. So be open to the mess and be as transparent with information, and be vulnerable to the idea as a leader that maybe you don't know, and that it's okay to bring your team together to learn together.
Yeah, it is so interesting. You're exactly right. People say, well, if I'm empathetic, I'm just the nicest person ever. I'm just, everybody smiles and it's all unicorns and rainbows. We've often, in the work Adrian and I have done, said, look, empathetic leaders, caring leaders are the best, are also very demanding, right? They get the work done, and they get the work done in a way where everybody's collaborating, which brings me to my next question, which is, walk us through that idea of your peers and team members as collaborators instead of competitors. Old school is we're all competing for the raise and the promotion. And now you're telling us we've got to make that big shift. We're not competitors, we're collaborators. So walk us through treating each other as peers and collaborators as opposed to, competitors.
Sure. Well, there was a time when if I had information you didn't have, I could get ahead of you. If I had contacts that you didn't have, I could outsell you, and that I would be, employee of the month or get the raise, get the promotion. In our complex business environment, no one has more information than someone else. They have different information. They have different contacts. They have different sources. They have different ideas. Not more, not less, just different. And all of those things coming together actually piece together the puzzle of opportunity. And so as a leader, you can say, y'all can get sharp elbows on each other, but that's not going to help us move forward, because something that you are holding back in order to be competitive is holding the whole team back in order to be effective. So moving from a place where, you saw that John came in and he worked 12 hours yesterday and you only made 4 phone calls last week, you must not be as good. I'd be much more interested in what 4 phone calls did she make that actually moved the needle than what he did in the 12 hours he was in the office. And I think that's competition gives us this patina of work being done, but often isn't actually moving the needle. And collaboration requires people to come together and move the needle together. And I think that's what you've got to be encouraging in your workplace.
So, Chris, where would you send people to learn more about your work?
Well, of course, I would send them to the bookstore to pick up a copy of The Adaptation Advantage. We just released this new book. And I think that I will say the book really synthesizes a lot of research. And so even if you just sit in the bookstore and copy down somebody and read through the endnotes, there's just so much research on the value of a collaborative workplace, of the data that demonstrates that inclusive and diverse places of belonging outperform from a business perspective other kinds of these more competitive organizations we were just talking about. There's a ton of research there, but I think if you want a native guide to that, I would encourage you to take a look at the book.
Well said. Yeah, from a writer. Yeah, get my book. I like that. I love it when people tell us about our books. I picked your book up in the library. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's nice. So give us a couple of conditions that need to be present in the new workforce. So if somebody's saying, okay, Chris, I've picked up your book. I've got the data which I need to present to my leadership. I'm bought in. Where do I start? What are some specific things leaders need to start doing right away?
I think just beginning to lead with empathy, which means have conversations with your people, and not just, did you get your work done today? But, how are things going? What is working for you? What is not working here? What tools or information do you need to better perform in your work? How's the family? And I think there's authentic questions about the experience of the worker in the workplace start to open up avenues of discovery of where can we get better as a team, where are there roadblocks that people kind of are uncomfortable talking about but need to be addressed. Those conversations, I think, are a really easy first place to start.
Isn't that interesting? Know people's stories. Adrian and I talk about that all the time. Do you know where people came from? How did you get here? What do you want to accomplish? It seems so revolutionary. I remember coming into the workforce. If people knew I was married, that was a big deal. And usually the tip-off was I had a wedding ring, and it pretty much stopped there. So this discovery is really interesting. So listen, Chris, we're always interested in self-care. Self-care tactics, rituals that people have that keep them centered. And you seem to be a very put together, very calm person. What are some of your personal practices that bring you to that wonderful state of calm?
Well, I think that must have been the acting class then. But
or have you duped us all completely today? Go ahead.
Yeah. No, listen, I think that the hardest lesson for me in my career, and I still struggle with it, quite honestly, is to recognize that that I need to put down the measuring stick. I do not have to measure up to anyone, or worse, my assumption about others' impressions of me, of the work that I do, that I can, I can get up every day and contribute in my small way to the thinking around the workplace, for example, and I don't have to think, well, what did somebody else do today? And I think that I get caught up in an exercise of, am I good enough? Am I working hard enough? Am I, succeeding enough relative to my perceptions of other people? And the more I talk to other people, they're saying, oh my God, I ask myself the same questions all the time. And so, maybe to some it's motivating. To me, it becomes exactly the opposite. So I just have kind of a mantra that, I'm enough. I'm capable. I'm contributing, and probably even more than I know. And that being enough is a lot more than some people will ever have.
You are enough, Chris, and this has been just such an amazing conversation. Yeah, you are. You do have a wonderful way about you that is very calming and helps us know that I'm sure your clients feel they're in good hands. So with this conversation, okay, and here's your challenge: you cannot use the word empathy. What one or two takeaways should our listeners leave with today from all your work?
I think first, maybe just relax into yourself and recognize, as I just said, that you're enough. You can get this done. We are in a place, I believe, today where we're kind of in a collective state of grief. We've lost so much over the last few years, whether it's the lives of friends and family, as some of us have, whether it's just time that we didn't get to spend with people, that it's we've read a lot about learning deficits. There's just been a ton of loss. And I think that the first thing I would say to anyone is be kind to yourself. Give yourself space to feel that and recognize that you are not alone in that. And that self-recognition, I can't use the word empathy, but self-recognition, I think, goes a long way to fueling your ability to really connect with the people who work with you. And so start with yourself. Give yourself a little love and a little space to feel the things that are very real, that have this current time has brought us to.
That is so excellent. Listen, Chris, you've been a fabulous guest. Adrian and I are big note takers, and I've got lots and lots of notes and can't wait to share them with friends and family, actually. So thank you so much for being our guest. For those of you that need a reminder, Chris is the author of the book, The Empathy Advantage, Leading the Empowered Workforce, available at fine bookstores everywhere. As Adrian said, don't check it out from the library. Buy a copy for yourself. Put it on the bestseller list. And I'm sure Chris would agree that it makes a wonderful gift if you've got an anniversary or a bar mitzvah coming up.
For everyone on your team.
There you go. So thanks again for being our guest today, Chris. It really was enlightening, and we're all enriched from your knowledge. Thank you so much.
Well, thank
Chris.
you both, and thank you for the really thought-provoking questions. I appreciate it, and I learned so much from having these conversations, so I thank you for that opportunity.
So Adrian, empathy. Boy, we've heard a lot of talk about that, and wasn't it interesting the perspective that Chris brought to leading with empathy, creating these empathetic workplaces? I'm curious as to what some of your big takeaways were.
There's a lot. We're going to have to unpack this for a little bit because, how many times have we used the term drive productivity? What a horrible term. It's like, the guy bouncing the drum at the beginning of the ship, row, and we've thought of it that way. And she's exactly right that the more human our workplace, the more engaged people would be. We know that. And yet we still drop terms like this. So, leaders have to move from the person who has all the answers to the person who says, let's figure it out together. Much more human way to lead.
Yeah, and the collaboration piece, that it's let's find out the answer together. And that when you do that, your people are more invested in the answer, which I thought was great. There's ownership there. One of my big takeaways, of course, around anxiety is just provide as much education as you can. Learn together about AI, for example, the new technologies. And I really appreciated the way she put it in perspective. She said, this is not the first time that technology has disrupted the workplace. And in every case, it's been a lift. She says, I appreciate that, we've got engines that carry heavy things and, spreadsheets instead of the abacus, which I know, Adrian, you are so connected to your abacus. That must have been very
I'm a big abacus. I majored in abacus back in college. So yeah. The what I like too that she's saying, because sometimes we go, because you and I, we go out and we give talks on culture. We talk about and sometimes there's people sitting in there. Okay, why do I care about empathy and this, that, and the other? And I just like what she said. Look, when people are freed from stress, they can be highly productive. And sometimes we say, oh, they just can't cut it here at XYZ company. We run hard. We're hard charging. And, you're cutting off a huge portion of the workforce that may need to work in a very different way. And that those people can be incredibly productive for you if we invest a little time and effort in learning these techniques.
Yeah, I love the way she said, look, empathy isn't just being nice. I've got to care. I've got to be nice. Empathy is understanding, where people come from. How do we work around these? The expression she used that I really stuck with me was, we've got complex people coming into the workplace, to do complex things. And we've got to just realize that we're going to have to work around sick kids. We're going to have to be open and honest. And you're right, open to the mess, which is all of us. Yeah. Face it, I'm a mess. You're a mess. You're a little bit bigger mess than I am. I think we can agree on that.
I'm quite a big mess. Yeah.
Everybody's a mess. Work around it. I love that. It just really stuck with me.
Well, and also working together. So then you asked that question around that idea of collaborating versus competing. And how many times, even just a few years ago, did we see that, a company would, we're pitting Pittsburgh against Cleveland, and who's going to come out on top? It's like, you're not competing with each other. You're competing with your competitors.
Right.
You're not competing internally. And how hard is that message for so many leaders to get across? And so she's saying, look, that's not helping people. Let's work together. Let's and the word that we're hearing more of is co-create instead of collaborate, right? That's a higher kind of level.
Yeah, and personal rituals. I loved it when she said, be empathetic to yourself, be kind to yourself, put down the measuring stick. Gosh, with all the stuff that we get every day, whether it's your news feed or your Facebook feed or Instagram, we're constantly measuring ourselves against everybody else and say, I am enough. I am enough. I mean, I was at a hockey game last night, and I'm amazed at how competitive people are in the stands to see how many times they can get on the Jumbotron. I'm like, it doesn't matter. We're here for the game, Let's just watch the game.
That is not going to change your life, to be on the Jumbotron.
I was on the Jumbotron four times. They go, great, good for you.
Yeah.
Put down the measuring stick. We all are too competitive in those silly ways.
In a minor, I don't know if they call it minor league hockey game. Yeah, I was on the Jumbotron 4 times. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, well, so my last thought too was, and she's exactly right. Chris was saying we're in this collective state of grief. I haven't thought about it that way, but you're right. We've all lost, whether we've lost some freedoms. We went on vacation to our favorite place, and it was just different than last summer than it was before. And it was this kind of grief. What happened? We've all lost people. We've all lost, loved ones. We've lost some ways of working, etc. That we need to give ourselves a break, that we're not alone. We've all faced this. And, to give ourselves a little beat here and realize that, be kind to ourselves.
Yes, because you're not alone. Be kind to yourself. You're not alone. Self-recognition fuels your ability to connect. I just thought that was a beautiful way to end the conversation. And of course, we always want to give special recognition and thanks to our wonderful team, our producer, Brent Klein, who puts together the podcast that hopefully you will listen to and send to your friends to listen to. And Christy Lawrence, who helps us find these amazing guests. And of course, to all of you that tune in and listen. If you like the podcast, please share it with your friends and family. We'd love you to visit our website, thecultureworks.com, for some free resources that help you and your team and your culture thrive and survive and make it through this mess, right?
And we love speaking to audiences around the world, virtually or in person, on the topics of culture, teamwork, and resilience. Chester loves it, so he'll come to your house if you want him to. He'll even stay for a week. So, give us a call. We'd love to talk to you about your event and, what we can do to help you build a great culture where you work.
So have a great week. We hope that you'll tune in again soon and take care of yourself. You are good enough and you are not alone. Take care. Cheers.